Chapter 8: The Locksmith and the Basement Door. The sun slowly descended when Arthur found a locksmith willing to take the job. Most had refused. Some gave excuses: too busy, too late in the day, not worth the drive out to the ranch. Others had been most direct, telling him they don't work on that land. But then he found one man, an older locksmith, mid-50s, wiry, with deep lines carved into his sun-darkened skin. He had hesitated, but when Arthur offered a generous sum, he finally relented. As they drove toward the ranch, Arthur noticed how the older man kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead, never looking directly at the surrounding land. "How long have you been in this town?" Arthur asked, breaking the silence. The locksmith shifted in his seat. "Long enough." Arthur studied his profile. "You know about the ranch, don't you?" The man's jaw tightened slightly. "Everyone does." Arthur exhaled. "Then you must know about the basement." The locksmith didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal pendant, rubbing it between his fingers. Arthur caught a glimpse before the man tucked it back into his shirt. A tiny silver cross. Arthur's stomach twisted. "What happened there?" he pressed. The locksmith sighed deeply, keeping his eyes on the road. "Some places hold memories," he said, "and some memories don't let go." Arthur felt a chill crawl up his spine. The rest of the drive passed in silence. The clicking of metal tools filled the quiet hallway. Arthur watched as the locksmith's hands moved, precise and practiced. The lock wasn't broken or rusted. It had been sealed intentionally. That realization sat heavy in Arthur's stomach. Then, a sharp click. The lock gave way. But instead of stepping back, the locksmith stared at the door. His hands had gone still, his eyes wide, as if something had just washed over him. Arthur frowned. "What's wrong?" The locksmith turned to him slowly, his face pale beneath the deep lines of his skin. In a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "This door should never have been opened." Arthur's breath stalled. Before he could react, the locksmith dropped his tools on the floor and turned. Not hurried, not running, just walking away. Arthur stared after him, confused. "Hey, where are you going?" The locksmith didn't answer. He just kept walking. Arthur stepped toward the door, watching as the man passed through the house's entrance and entered the open yard. Still, he did not stop. He walked past the truck, past the main gate, heading down the long dirt road toward town. Arthur swallowed. The locksmith was leaving on foot, and he wasn't looking back. Something about that made Arthur's skin crawl worse than anything else. He turned back toward the now unlocked basement door. It was ajar, waiting. Arthur retrieved a lamp and flashlight before heading down. The air inside the basement was thick, warmer than it should have been, and carried a faint, stagnant dampness. The scent of herbs was more pungent now, clinging to the wooden beams like smoke. As he descended, his footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor. The space was more extensive than he expected, stretching beyond the boundaries of the house above. Arthur swept the flashlight across the room. Wooden shelves lined the walls, covered in a thin layer of dust. Some still held old glass jars, their contents dried and unrecognizable. Others were empty, their surfaces scarred with deep scratches. In the center of the floor, a large wooden crucifix leaned against the far wall, its surface cracked with age. Arthur exhaled, stepping closer. That's when he saw the markings. A faint circle, its edges worn with time, was carved into the floor. Around it, symbols and shapes he didn't recognize had been carefully etched into the stone. His stomach tightened. The basement wasn't just storage. This was something else. Then, his flashlight beam landed on a wooden box, half hidden beneath a collapsed shelf. Arthur crouched, resting the lamp on the floor, and opened the box. Several old journals lay stacked together, their leather bindings cracked and stiff. His breath hitched. Gently, he gathered them into his arms, knowing they were necessary. But as he turned to leave, something moved in the darkness. Arthur swung the flashlight, but there was nothing there, just shadows stretching across the walls. Then, the lamp flickered, and before he could react, the basement door slammed shut. The light died instantly, plunging everything into darkness. Arthur froze, his breath shallow. The only sound was his heartbeat, loud in his ears. Then, a whisper, software faint, carried through the dark like a thread of smoke. Then another, and another. They grew, dozens, maybe more, all overlapping, some calling his name, others speaking in rushed, frantic Spanish, others nothing but low, guttural murmurs. Arthur whipped around, his flashlight trembling as he swept it across the basement. Nothing. Suddenly, a voice rang out, clear and distinct. "Hurry, it comes." Arthur's stomach dropped. This time he saw them. Two red dots glowing faintly in the farthest corner of the basement. His breath caught. The whispers stopped. And in the silence that followed, a low growl rumbled through the dark. Arthur didn't wait. He turned, ran toward the stairs, and threw his weight against the basement door. It wouldn't budge. His pulse roared in his ears as he slammed his shoulder into the wood, fighting to break free. Finally, the door gave way. He stumbled into the hallway, gasping, grabbed the nearest piece of furniture, and pushed it against the door. The whispers were gone. The glow was gone. The basement was silent again. But the scent of herbs, gone. And somehow, that was the most unsettling thing of all. Arthur sat at the table, the dim glow of the kitchen lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The old journals lay before him, their cracked leather bindings, whispering of a history no one had wanted to remember. His hands still trembled slightly from what had happened in the basement. The weight of it sat heavily on his chest. The locked door, the whispers, the red eyes staring at him from the dark. Whatever had been sealed away down there was no longer contained. And now, he needed to know why. Taking a slow breath, he picked up the oldest journal and carefully turned the brittle yellowed pages. The pages were fragile, crumbling slightly at the edges when he brushed his fingers over them. The handwriting was uneven, the ink faded and blotched with age. Arthur adjusted the lamp, the dim glow flickering against the delicate script as he began to read. This land should never have been settled. Arthur's pulse hitched at the first line. It was never meant to belong to us. It was meant to remain untouched, free. And for our trespass, we have been marked. Marked. The words sent a slow, cold dread unfurling in his chest. He turned the page. Before this place belonged to Mexico, before the settlers came, and before the borders were drawn, this land was always in conflict. It was a place of war, soaked in the blood of those who fought for control. The indigenous people fought to protect it. The Mexican armies marched upon it, and the settlers from the north took what they could. It has never known peace, only death. Arthur felt a chill crawl along his spine. The land has swallowed too much blood, too many souls, It does not forget, and it does not forgive. His fingers danced around the edge of the page. This wasn't just a ghost story. This was a warning. He kept reading the pages, detailing years of death and disappearances. Men gone missing, women left, widowed, entire families were wiped out. And then, the shift. We sought salvation in the church. We built the chapel. We brought the priests. And for a time, it helped. Arthur's brow furrowed. Helped? His fingers traced the faded words. The disappearances slowed. The land became quieter. But it did not last. It did not stop. Only lessened. Arthur exhaled, his throat dry. The chapel had worked, but only as a temporary shield. Whatever haunted this place, whatever owned it, had never indeed left. The chapel had only kept it at bay for a while. The journal ended there. Arthur carefully turned another page, but it was blank. No final words, no resolution, just silence. Arthur slowly closed the journal, his mind reeling. This was bigger than a family tragedy. This was a warning. And now, he was part of it. The lamp flickered. Arthur stilled. The air in the kitchen shifted, thickening, pressing in around him. He turned his head slowly, gaze locking onto the hallway. The basement door. It was still blocked with furniture. But something felt wrong. Then, a sound. Software deliberate. Footsteps. Not from the basement. Not from outside. From inside the house. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't alone.